Okay, this is a Bolens tractor, G214. The 21 is 21 horse. The 4 is 4-wheel drive. I'm going to do the front kingpin seal. I've already cleaned mine, but mine was leaking right in there. And I found another seal, got it on order. So I'm gonna take it apart and make sure I get everything I need. Now I'm gonna pull the wheel off. I already got it jacked up higher on this side to keep the oil from running out, or most of it. So got a jack stand, then I put some blocks under there just in case. And this will be the first time this wheel has come off since it was built. I've owned this tractor brand new since '86. This is the part we're going to be working on. That's the seal right there. This is the front axle diagram. 4-wheel drive. Okay, there's 6 wheel lug nuts and they're 17 millimeter. So let me get those off. Okay, got those off. They're awful short. I figured they'd be longer than that. But anyway, first time they've been off since the tractor was built back in '86. Let's get the wheel off and see what we got. Well, if you want to see what a 36-year-old tire looks like, that's it. Bridgestone, 6.00 12-inch rim. Original tire. Only reason it's staying up, it has a tube in it. Okay, looking at the diagram, this piece needs to come off. There's an O-ring under here. This is a 14 millimeter. So let's get that off, see what it looks like. Got the 4 bolts out. Had to put a screwdriver between this housing and this housing and prise it up. See what we got. Okay. Looks like a bushing in there. And it's supposed to be an O-ring. Yep. Here's the O-ring. Big thick O-ring. Actually still look pretty good, but if I can get a new one, I'm going to put the new one back in. And there's a clip right in here. Big C clip. That's going to have to come out. And see what's next. Looking at the schematic, looks like when you take this clip off, this whole shaft right here, it's going to slide down. There also is a seal here at the end by the where you bolt on your tire, but it's not leaking. So I shouldn't have to take none of this apart. So it looks to me, once I take this clip off, the shaft should slide down. The whole thing should slide down. And there's the seal. This bolts to the axle, so I shouldn't have to mess with that. So I'm going to, if that's going to come completely down, instead of trying to get this tie rod end out, I might break this little piece. I'm just going to unbolt it right here. 4 bolts. I think that's taking a 14 millimeter. Took the 4 bolts off right there. Took the bracket off for the tie rod end. So if this whole thing, the shaft slides down, we'll be all set. Okay, got the snap ring out. Pretty good size. Looks like right there. Okay, that's the bearing then. Okay, it looks like this shaft is probably pressed into the bearing. So if I knock it down, this whole thing should come down. That's what I'm thinking. Also, now that I'm looking at it closer with the wheel off, I can shake this. Right there. That's probably why the seal's leaking. So down in here there's another bearing and a bushing and stuff. So we'll see. Something must be worn, cause it to leak. It wasn't a bad leak, but it would leave a little bit of oil on the concrete when you park it. Right there. So, all right, let's see what happens. Okay, that's working. I got this. Okay, that's working. I got this piece of steel shaft off of a wheelbarrow I had for the front wheel. Front wheel spins on it. Fits down in there just right, so don't damage anything. And I knocked it down a little bit. Wasn't hard. And you can see right here separating. So it looks like once I knock this down, the whole piece will come off. So let's see what happens. Okay, it just slid right out. There's a gear in there that hooks to the drive shaft for the front wheel, four-wheel drive. I'm probably going to have to take this other housing off right there so I can get the gear out and flip it over and knock the bearing out without tearing it up, because the bearings are not available. Of course, you might be able to go match one up at a bearing shop if you have it with you. And you need something to catch the oil. And this bottom part is full of oil also. And there's the seal right there that's leaking. And another reason I may have to take this housing off to see if there's a bushing in the bottom, because I could shake it. So looking at that, there's the seal, some kind of a bushing, and it looks like a big washer, and then the shaft comes up through there with the gears at the bottom. Well, that must be the gear that's in the housing. This is at the bottom of the shaft. There's the shaft. Right here's where the top bearing was running. So there's another bearing down there. So this number 2 right here is the gear that goes against this gear that's still in this housing. So that's the gear that's right there. So learn as we go. Okay, I stuck the hub back on. I got the seal out right there, wiped it down, stuck it back through, and what it is there's a bushing in there, and I guess the bushing is letting it shake like that. Of course, it's not into the bearing yet, but I did get it into the gear, so I shouldn't have to take that apart. So I don't know if that bushing is available or not. But there is some play right there. See right there? Brass bushing. Must have some wear in it, which caused the seal to leak. So we'll see if we can find some parts. I don't want to take this apart unless I know I have the parts or can get the parts. But I think he told me the bushings and the bearings are not available unless somebody's got one sitting on the shelf. Okay, so the bushing is not available, the brass bushing. So I'm going to bring it to a machine shop. So I'm going to take this apart so we can bring the housing down there. And they can measure and all that stuff, knock it out, put in the new one. I already took the bolts out right here, 14 millimeter. Before I did that, at the bottom here, there's a plug, 14 millimeter. I drained the oil out. Also, which I thought was a big washer, and it is kind of a big washer down in there. It's like a bearing. So it's like a washer with a groove in it, and the bearing sets in that groove, and then another washer goes on top, so the all rides together there. So that's out of the way. I'm going to get something and prise this up. Get it broke loose. So I just got it broke loose, went around it with a screwdriver while I was pulling up on this hub and popped it out. A little bit heavy. There's the big gear. See down in there, there's another bearing. And in here, there's another seal. Hub seal or wheel seal. Those two parts was available, so I ordered those, but it's not leaking, so I'm not going to change it. But I'll have the parts if needed. And inside of here, this bearing sets in this cup right here. And then this gear goes against this gear with the shaft in it. So since I have to have this bushing replaced, they're going to have to take this shaft and gear out. There's a cap under here, pressed in cap. Got to knock that out. Take the clip off the bearing, the C-clip. Then you can push the shaft out and get that out. And then they'll be able to knock the old bushing out. So I had to take this piece off after all. So I got it off, took the gear off. It goes in there in the bearing, because this is the part that slides into the bushing, and they're going to need that to measure to see how big the hole is on the inside for it to slide into the bushing. So I got to bring this piece and the main housing to the machine shop and get that bushing made. Okay, got it back from the machine shop. Took a couple weeks. They had to order some stock and cut that bushing and make it. Now with the new bushing in there, no more shake. Can't be super tight because it's got to be able to turn. That's how it steers. But yep. Good deal. And I let them pull this gear and shaft out. They had to take this cap out. What he did is he drilled a hole and put a little remover on here and pulled it out, and then resealed it once he put it back together, and went ahead and put a new bearing in here, which you could find at a bearing shop. He went down the road and matched one up. So we got a new bearing in here, and then once he got it all back together, he just welded up that little hole, which I was able to get another cap, but since he did it this way, and shouldn't leak. I'll just save that in case I need it for the other side, which is not leaking. And talking about the other side, I went ahead and had them made another bushing. While they was doing one, they could do two. So I just have it on hand just in case the other side starts leaking. This is the right side, like sitting in the tractor seat on the right side. That's what we're working on. So, and just going to clean it up and put it back together. Okay, cleaned up the surfaces. I'm using this Loctite gray, some I had on hand, so I may as well use it. And then I got some 80W90 oil. I poured some in there and around the gear. Put some on this bearing and some on that bearing under there, just to give it a little pre-lube. And now I'm just going to line up the dowels with the dowel holes right here and work it back down in there. Don't want to bind this bearing, and get it back in that cup and tighten it down. Okay, all these are tightened down. I crisscross. It'll set down in there fairly easy. Turn this a little bit and make sure your gears are meshed together in there, and then tighten everything down. It should go easy. You don't force anything. If you force it, there's something wrong. The bearing's not in its pocket, or the gears are not lined up. Okay, next thing is these washers and this bushing slides in the shaft. I already put oil on them. And apparently that washer rides on the bottom of this. And the shaft goes through the middle here up to the top bearing. So now I have to put the seal on. This is the old one. It didn't look that bad, but for 36 years old, it's probably time to change it. Here's the new seal. There's the part number. And this is a Isky part, because the Bolens tractor is the Isky tractor. It was just rebranded to sell in the United States. That's my understanding. Okay, I'm going to get this, put a little oil in here and set in that new seal. I use a piece of wood and a hammer and just tap it in all the way around. But I may have to get a smaller piece of wood to get in on this side. Here's the new seal, and it comes with a new race, which is right there on this old one. So I'm going to knock that off and put this new one on. But I'm going to leave this together in the seal so it's not distorted while I push it in the housing. Okay, the seal is in. What I ended up doing was pushing it in by hand most of the way. Then I got this little piece of wood I had, go around the edges and to get it flush. Just pushing on it. So that went pretty good. This thing here, I got the wear ring off. It's hard to get it going. Once it gets started, you're going to need 2 little pry bars or screwdrivers to work each side and just work its way up and get it off. So that's the old one. Okay, so we're moving right along. And I went ahead and poured some oil in down there. Let me pour a little more. Just kind of a head start on the refill. So the next thing to do is to remount this piece on the axle, put the gear and stuff in it, and then slide this in from the bottom after I put this new wear ring on here. In case you want to change the bearing and seal back here behind the hub, this is the bearing number. And this is the seal. Just for your information. Also, it'd be nice if you have a vise to hold this thing while you get this off and put the new one on. I found a big socket. It's 1 7/8 that will fit this. So hopefully I should be able to knock it down evenly without messing up the flange here. So we'll see. Okay, using the big socket, knocked it down real nice. It's a little tough at first, but then once it started going, it went right on down. So, new wear ring for the new seal. Now for the tricky part. This gear here has to go inside of the housing. Then you come down here, this bearing and this gear go inside. Different size shafts. Now I didn't show this when I took it apart because I didn't think I'd have to take it apart. But to bring this housing to the machine shop to get the measurements off to this, I had to take it apart. So what it is, this bearing and gear is pushed together, and it's a different spline that goes to the tractor side of the axle and fits in this hole. You have to tap it in. But before you can do that, this gear, so that's two different splines, fits this one. So when I put this together, I'm going to slide this up through the shaft, through this hole, into this gear, which apparently, if I remember right, the gear was just sitting in there. So when you slide it through, you're going to have to line it up. Sort of like that. And then this gear will mesh with that gear. And then the shaft coming out of the tractor, front end, will go through this gear once you put it together. So this will be done. This gear will be just floating around in there until you put the shaft through, and then you'll have to line it up through this to get it lined up with this gear, which shouldn't be too bad since you have room up here because the bearing's out of it. Because once you come up with the shaft, then you can put the bearing in and the C-clip, and should be good. I always coat everything with a little bit of oil. So that's what we're going to do. Clean your surfaces here and on the tractor side, on the front axle. Then I'm going to use this again, gasket maker, Loctite. And bolt it together, line up the two pins here. and go from there. This is my first time doing this, so I'm a uncertified shade tree mechanic. I do my own stuff, but I just gotta figure it out as I go. Okay, put this gear in flush, or this gear in bearing. If you go too far, I notice this gear won't be straight in the hole here for your shaft, because it's just sitting there till the shaft comes through. So just put it flush, and then I'm gonna put my sealer and all and bolt it on. Slide the drive shaft from the front axle in here, and go from there. So there's the shaft coming out of the tractor side, going through that bearing. Got to line up the dowels, and takes 4 bolts, and they come in from this side. And you can see the gear in here, it's just sitting in there. We'll have to flip it up whenever I slide in the shaft. Okay, got it ready. I'll have to slide that through here, shaft out here through that gear. Then I'm going to put this little jack under it to hold it up. Okay, that worked out good. Got the shaft in there, through the gear. They're engaging. So we got to put a bearing in here and a big C-clip there to hold the bearing. I guess the shaft is just pushed into this gear, and that's it. The weight of the tractor riding on this piece must be what holds it all together, because there's no clip on the shaft for the bearing that I can remember. Okay, I put a jack underneath and a block of wood to hold the assembly up. Then I set the bearing in here and tapped it down until the shaft came up through the center. And it was a snug fit, so apparently that's all it holds this whole thing together. Now there's a groove right here. You got to get the bearing below that groove so you can put the C-clip back in. And I'm probably going to dump in some oil right here to fill this thing up. Then put the cap on. There's a big fat O-ring seal that goes there on the top. That's the part number. The old one looks pretty good. Since I got a new one, I'll go ahead and do it. It goes right in this groove here. And there's a brass bushing in there too. But no oil on it, so I'm going to put some Mystic grease in there. And around here too. And then the cap will fit over here and bolt to this piece. So that would be what holds this assembly on here. This cap over the top. So now with it bolted, it can't go down. So got the C-clip in there. That black ring. So we're getting there. Almost done. I slipped the O-ring on to the housing there. Put the grease. Put some grease in there. So all we gotta do is put this on like a cap. And put the bolts in. Looks like new. Still got to hook up the tie rod, bolt it to there, and put the wheel on. Okay, it's all assembled. Put in the 4 bolts there for the tie rod end bracket. All the bolts are 14 mm, which makes it nice, except for the wheel bolts. The wheel bolts or lug nuts are 17 mm. Turns a little tight, but I guess it'll loosen up with all the new parts in there. So we should be all good to go. I already drained the oil out of the other side hub. So on this side, there's a plug here on the top. That's where you fill it up at. And as I showed on the other side, down here at the bottom, there's a plug right here. Drain that out, drains all the oil out. The oil runs through the whole front end. The four-wheel drive gears, center gears, all the way across. So, okay. That's how I fixed the wheel bushing and seal on my Bolens G214.